Hello, my name is Kenny Wong, and this is my operating system's firewall and SELinux presentation for ISA 4220 Fall 2015. The first operating system I'm going to talk about is Windows 2012 R2. One improvement that has been made through the storage has been enhancements to the Storage Management API. This includes a new architecture that catalogs storage resources 10 times faster. It has been adding remote and cluster awareness when managing storage spaces, and they're currently using a virtual memory manager to manage the storage spaces. These new storage spaces also feature write-back caching and storage tiering. Another feature would be the server message block 3.0. This server message blocker is directly enhanced to provide 50% improvement for small workloads when using a network adapter, which increases efficiency and the density of hosting workloads. Additionally, the Internet Small Computer Systems interface allows for sharing of block-level storage over a TCP/IP network. The quality of service (QoS) has been enabled at the VHDX layer to allow for set limits on the max input/output operations per second allowed on all virtual disks. Networking on the Windows 2012 R2 systems have also been improved. The Network Interface Controller (NIC) allows for load balancing modes which include address hashing, Hyper-V port, and dynamic balancing modes. Additionally, there are 3 different team modes. One mode being static teaming, which requires configuration of both the server and the Ethernet switch. The second team would be the switch independent, which allows you to connect each NIC team to a different Ethernet switch. The third team mode would be LACP, which is Link Aggregation Control Protocol, which allows the server to communicate with the Ethernet switch during team creation process. Workplace Join is a feature for the Active Directory, which allows companies to provide a single sign-on experience. The Active Directory also has a multi-factor access control, which controls the access of network resources based on criteria such as user identification, network location, and group membership. A web application proxy also exists to allow users outside of the organization to gain access to applications and services inside the network servers. Hyper-V has also been enhanced by allowing movements of hard disks to different locations while a virtual machine is still running. The live migration with the new network adapters allows for remote direct memory access. Also, there is a new snapshot storage. Group policy caching reduces the time of processing of group policies on the client's server. The IIS, which is the Internet Information Services, has been redesigned to handle large configurations and improve memory efficiency of the IIS startup process, which is a dynamic site activation. The idle worker process pageout saves memory by allowing the idle worker process to be paged to a disk, so then the worker process is removed from the memory, which in turn helps lower response times to cold requests. There have also been some changes to the remote desktop service. They have improved on video streaming, which allows for better codecs that deliver better video performance. Screen session shadowing has allowed admins to shadow sessions of remote users. And the addition of Quick Reconnect, which reconnects to disconnected sessions in under 5 seconds. A few best practices that came up for Windows Servers 2012 R2 would be to use a shared virtual hard disk. Another would be to ensure all Microsoft updates are up to date, which would be implemented by running system updates periodically. Thirdly, it would be to run periodic performance countermeasures. against a host, which to be implemented would be to perform a performance analysis of logs. And a fourth best practice would be to ensure Hyper-V is up to date. And to do that, you would just run an update for Hyper-V. The next operating system is CentOS. Technically speaking, it's able to run 5,120 CPUs, although it's only been tested at 160. The max memory is up to 64 terabytes, and the max boot of the LUN size is 50 terabytes. The virtual address space is at 128 terabytes also. CentOS was developed with the Red Hat Enterprise Linux, and it supports installations in UEFI secure boot mode. Another good feature is that VMware tools are already out the box, which allows for installation of two different virtual SCSI adapters, which are bus logic and LSI logic. A few best practices would be to configure the firewall to system preferences, establish wired connections when possible to improve network security, ensure all patches are up to date, restricting root access and establish password policies so that non-root users can't change any of the security settings, etc., and logging all activity using the audit subsystem with the audit-d command. Next up is the Windows Firewall. The Windows Firewall reduces the risk of network security threats. It uses a network access protection. This ensures that all the computers on the network comply with policies defined in various software and system configurations, and it prevents communications between compliant and non-compliant computers. It also protects sensitive data and intellectual property. Integration with IPsec, which is Internet Protocol Security. This protocol authenticates and encrypts each IP packet of communication during the sessions. Best practices for the Windows Firewall include maintaining an updated firewalls file by running periodic system updates, enabling connectivity between external and internal computers by establishing a perimeter firewall, update the group policies periodically, which could be implemented by updating the Active Directory domain service weekly, and to ensure that non-Windows operating systems can communicate with computers running Windows in the network. This would be implemented by creating an isolated domain by adding a certificate-based authentication or add the computer to the authentication exemption list. The firewalls for Linux is called IP tables. It allows for connection tracking and two different types of network address translation, which is source NAT and destination NAT. The application firewall is called proxy, which occurs in the application level of the OSI model. IP tables allows for restricted traffic between different networks, denying access to unauthorized users. It also has packet filtering, which occurs in layer 3 and layer 4 of the OSI model. The packets go through a series of change from pre-routing, which is entering before the routing decision is made, to input, which is where the packet is locally delivered, to the forward chain, where the packets are routed, but not for local delivery, the output, which is when the packets are sent to the machine, and the post-routing, which is when the routing decision is made. A few best practices for IP tables would be to create a policy for allowing and blocking connections, using the IP tables command to accept or reject connection from specific IP addresses. Another one would be to establish specific rules This allows the user to allow which type of traffic is allowed in the IP table's command lines. Another best practice would be to add additional rules to prevent inaccessible servers when rules are flushed. To do this, the user or admin would need to include a drop or reject rule at the end of the chain. The last portion of this presentation is going to be about SELinux. SELinux provides access controls for centralized policy to determine what software can access what resources. It was developed by the NSA with partnership of Red Hat. It's a complementary to the firewall, and it implements mandatory access controls using the Linux Security Modules framework. The Mac control allows full control over interactions of the software, and it allows granular permissions for subjects and objects. The implementation of SELinux uses role-based access controls. Each user or process is assigned a 3-string context, which consists of a role, username, and a domain. Other things such as files, network ports, and other hardware get a name, a role, and a type. The policy rules of SELinux consist of specific permissions. A policy will consist of a mapping file, a rule file, and an interface file. All must be compiled together to create a single policy file. The path name-based system does not require labeling or relabeling the file system. A few best practices for SELinux would be to establish various levels of privilege for applications to run at. This would be implemented by creating a policy that determines what applications are given privileges to, from least to average to most. Another practice would be to avoid stagnant or default password. To prevent this, admins would have the users change passwords periodically to ensure that the system stays secure. Another best practice would be to ensure that there are no third-party vulnerabilities. To ensure that this happens, the admin should run periodic checks to ensure that the system and its policies are up to date. Lastly, users should be running as a non-root user, and only admins should be running as root users to ensure that proper credentials are used when altering policies so that nothing gets messed up within the system. That concludes my presentation on operating systems, firewalls, and SELinux. Thank you.